The topic of this keynote, as you can see, is policy-driven LCA in the age of the triple planetary crisis. From my point of view, LCA is currently being used in policy at an ever-increasing speed. Thereby, policy is now affecting the way LCA is formed and practiced. And the main reason that I believe that policymakers are now adopting LCA into legislation is because they believe that this is an efficient way to tackle the triple planetary crisis. I'm employed by the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, SEPA. The SEPA is a committed coordinating force for Sweden's environmental efforts. We conduct and coordinate Sweden's environmental work. Together with many others, we work to preserve biodiversity, reduce climate impact, and contribute to a resource-efficient society. And SEPA has a role in the implementation of environmental efforts at different levels, in Sweden, within the European Union, and internationally. To the left, you can see an illustration of the national Swedish environmental objectives. This is a common platform that was decided upon by the Swedish Parliament in 1999. And it was later followed, it's 16 different goals, which were later followed by an overarching generation goal. And the environmental objectives provide a structure for Sweden's environmental efforts at the national level, within the EU and internationally. Naturally, of course, to the right, the SEPA also have important tasks for achieving the UN global sustainability goals. We'll have just one final slide on the SEPA, then we can get down to it. So, in this word cloud, I think these efforts of the SEPA are manifested in a number of ways. And looking at it, to me, when I just first take it up, there are three of those that pop up, and that's climate action, it's limit air pollution, and it's biodiversity. So the first thing I see when I look to this slide is the triple planetary crisis: climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss. And I think that is kind of really the core on what we are doing. I want to talk to you a bit on not how we ended up here, not how we ended up with the triple planetary crisis, but more on how we ended up in this hall. And I would like to use myself as an example here. I said I'm from Gothenburg, and I attended high school less than a kilometer away from here. And at the time, I majored in natural sciences, and I had a favorite course. It was a very, I would say, like a practical environmental course on environmental protection practices. So it was a lot about studying the pH in acidified bodies of water and collecting microorganisms and so. And that's where I kind of developed a part of the reason that I'm into environment. At that time, already I felt a concern about the environment, the state of the environment, what we were doing to it. And I felt a commitment to address the environmental issues that I could see around me. Later on, as I learned about life cycle assessment, about the life cycle perspective, about life cycle thinking, I also developed a conviction on the benefits of the life cycle perspective, what we can achieve by using it, how it can help us to address these environmental issues. And I think that, I feel that I'm probably not the only one who have thought and acted in this kind of course. I think that we are many here today that have a concern for the environment, that have a commitment to address these issues, and also a conviction about the benefits of using the life cycle perspective. As already introduced, slightly at least, on the theme for this conference is good data, better models, and sustainable decisions. The policies that I'm talking about, and to be frank, maybe I'm more into the public policies, as you can surely guess from me being a government official. The policies are really about the decision part of these three. The decisions that can be based on life cycle assessment. And the kind of decisions that you want to make, of course, they will then influence what is good data, what is a better model. And since policy, as I see it now, is starting to shape how LCA is being developed and what is happening to LCA, how we treat it, how we practice LCA. Policy is indirectly also affecting what is good data, what is a better model. Looking back, however, I don't really feel that policy has been a big driving force for life cycle assessment and the development of life cycle assessment. This has not been something that has been up to the policymakers. When I first learned about life cycle assessment, it was not as a student, but as an employee of one of the companies who incidentally also was mentioned earlier here as one of the sponsors of this conference. We had an ambition, we had a need to communicate around the environmental impacts of our products. We had a need to understand the life cycle impact of our products. And we used those insights gained to drive our product development. By, I would say integrating it into our R&D work. I would say that we were fairly successful in doing so, but it was not really something that we could manage all by ourselves. It was something for which we needed the close cooperation with academia and with other like-minded companies that had the similar kind of issues and challenges, and which we did through the Swedish Life Cycle Center. The communication part, of course, did not come easily. And the initial focus we had was more around the fact that we were conducting life cycle assessments rather than the results or the outcomes of those assessments. Over the years, however, things changed. Mainly driving forces such as customers. And it could be private customers or companies. It was companies or customers that were active in green public procurement. They put demands on us. They put demands on us to develop how we communicated around life cycle assessment. That was an important driving force for us in how we developed our work. And I think over the years we also picked up, we did, and a lot of other companies picked up a lot of the development that was carried out by academia. Things that were sometimes very integral in kind of developing the methods that we used. And aside from that, I would say now I've been kind of focusing on what I have seen myself, the development in industry. But I'm convinced, of course, that there were other driving forces for the academic propulsion and development of LCA. But for the policymakers and the people into policy, I would say that the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency was a part of the Swedish Life Cycle Center even since it was started in 1996, but we did not take the front seat. It was always industry, it was always academia that drove this development, that steered what is happening to LCA. The government agencies, they were trying to get involved, but they were standing a bit on the side and not taking that much of an active role. And this is kind of where I feel that we are changing today. Currently, LCA is being integrated into policy, into public policy, and the government agencies and the government offices and the politicians, they need to step up here a bit and be more engaged in this development. I would like to give some examples on how life cycle thinking and life cycle assessment have been integrated into Swedish and Nordic policy. As I said, coming from industry, I didn't really see the government agencies taking a big part, and I have a very clear recollection of the first time I heard a government official or a government agency official talk about life cycle assessment in kind of the way that I was used to speaking about it with industry and academia representatives. It was at one of the internal Swedish Life Cycle Center network meeting. It was held in Stockholm, and a presenter from the Swedish Transport Administration described the system with the climate calculations. So mandatory calculations that are needed for government contracts for infrastructures, contracts bigger than 50 million SEK, that's about 4.4 million euros. And this was a practice that was introduced then in 2015, I think. So that was kind of where I first heard about this. But there have been other ways to work with life cycle thinking and life cycle based decisions also. The Swedish Environmental Protection Agency is administrating the climate leap. This is a investment support which makes it possible to invest in fossil-free technology for the future and green transition. It's applicable to companies, to municipalities, to regions and organizations. Part of it is funded by the EU Recovery Fund. And it has been calculated that the benefits of this investment program from when it was started then in 2015 to June this year, it saved 2.8 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. And the calculations that you have to provide in order to be eligible for this support are based on a life cycle thinking. Finally, as of January 1st, 2022, the climate impact of new buildings in Sweden needs to be declared. And in addition to this climate declaration, there will also be climate limit values for new buildings. They will be launched at latest January 1st, 2027. And these climate declarations and these climate limits are, of course, not something that is unique to Sweden, but common to all of the Nordic area, as indicated by this picture to the right. Harmonized carbon limit values for buildings in the Nordic countries, published by Nordic Innovation. So this is a bit of an overview. We will not go into detail about this. And of course, there is a significant Nordic collaboration regarding climate declaration and limit values. This is the Nordic countries are not the first. I should admit the Netherlands are the front runners along with France in these issues. But I think the Nordic countries are coming on strong now. And these figures kind of illustrates the Nordic adoption of building climate regulations. And there are different approaches to these way of declare and sometimes even limit values. And there are also different approaches to weighted modeling, how you treat biogenic carbon dioxide or whether the databases are conservative or not. But there is a lot of cooperation going on this and trying to harmonize the way climate is treated regarding buildings in the Nordic countries. As evident, there is this legal framework for disclosing life cycle greenhouse gases in the Nordic countries. And this brings us to the kind of the European, the EU way of regulating climate-related impacts from buildings and the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. The energy performance for building directives is not then the only life cycle related legislation in the EU. I know also by the way now that Mauro Cordello of the European Commission will give another keynote tomorrow on the topic of these European legislations, so I will not go into depth. But I want to mention a few of these kind of to set it in context. So the battery regulation, I think, is one of the most fundamental pieces of legislation that we are looking into quite a lot currently. It sets limit values. It will set limit values. First, it mandates the declaration and it sets form of climate performance levels, and later on it will also be then threshold levels for batteries in climate impact. And this the way the LCA is integrated into this is by looking into the demands from the product environmental footprints and the product environmental footprint category rules for batteries. These are, of course, not legal texts, so they are very important. They should be considered more like standards, but not really legal texts. So you can't just refer to them in EU legal text, but you need to incorporate them somehow into the legal framework. And the way of doing this for the battery regulation is through delegated acts. And what you do when you develop these delegated acts is that you use this background material, the environmental footprint recommendation, the PFCR, and then you add something more, something that is more specific to this special type of products. And here actually you do not only get the views of the scientists of industry who are working with these products, but also of the policymakers. And this is a case where the policymakers get interested in models and data on how you model electricity and what kind of data you back it up with. And I think this is important to understand for anyone that they are the policymakers, they really get into this and they will influence the way that LCA is carried out when carrying out this policy. The eco-design regulation I should quickly mention also. The measures are currently pending. As for the battery regulation, delegated acts will be developed. We don't know yet whether they will entail demands on climate or environmental footprints, but it is for sure a possibility. So we'll have to wait and see. So these were a couple of legislative acts, and I think that this slide is really about why I think this is happening and why we are here now and why why the policies makers are focusing so much on this. So the Eco-Design Directive was introduced for energy using products already in 2005, and it uses, I would say, a screening LCA methodology to pinpoint what kind of demands you should put on different kinds of products. It was updated in 2009 to cover also energy-related products, and it has been very successful. So in 2020, it was calculated that the primary energy savings of under the Eco-Design Directive, that is compared to the business as usual scenario where you wouldn't have it, were 10%, and the greenhouse gas savings were 9%. And to a policymaker, these are very interesting figures. It means that this is a kind of policy that belongs in the bigger policy mix. I mean, there's a lot of other policy, of course, that are not product related, but this belongs in that mix. And I think that the reason that the policymakers now are adopting life cycle assessment into legislation is that they believe that when you take more kinds of products, more than the energy related, into consideration, and when you consider more kinds of environmental impacts besides the primary energy use and besides the greenhouse gases, it will be an efficient way to address the triple planetary crisis. So in this case, policy is really integrating life cycle assessment. The policymakers are integrating life cycle assessment into policy, and this policy will decrease the climate change and the air pollution and halt the damage to biodiversity. And LCA will still be used now. When using LCA for policy, it will be used, but it will maybe be phrased in a different way. And what is considered a better model or good data might be something that differs from what one is used to when industry or academia is driving the development. And I think I have put up a couple of questions here that I don't want us to answer right now, but eventually they are, I think, good to discuss. So it's, how will this integration of life cycle assessment into policy shape the development of the data and the methods? And which roles will the members of the academic and industrial community assume as researchers and experts? And I do hope that you will take some of the time during this conference to ponder upon these questions and discuss them, and also take them further on in your work as life cycle experts. So apparently it's a bit stuck here. I'll try to switch it in another way. I'm not quite sure here. Here we are. So I want to leave you with a few thoughts. So 2 more slides. So first scientists and then policy officials. And here I say scientists in the broadest possible sense. It can be in academia, it can be in the industry, the NGOs, we also saw here, the others, and also in government agencies. So first of all, I think it's important to understand, now we are a record number of members or delegates here, but still, this is a scarce resource. Life cycle literacy is still low. There are few in the communities who can contribute to this. You are very valuable, and I want you to understand this, and all the colleagues also who couldn't join. And then I think if you are motivated by concern for the environment, if you are motivated by a commitment to address the environmental issues, and if you do share this conviction of the benefits of the life cycle perspective, you have kind of a golden opportunity here. Because now the policymakers, they want to change this. They want to affect the environment in a good way, and they want to do it using life cycle assessment. And you should, I think, spend at least part of your time in thinking, okay, so how can we do this? What is the best way? What is the best model when using it for policy? I think whoops, now it went very quickly instead. I think the life cycle community I think it's very vivid, and it hosts really a lot of different views, which will be explored during these days on how to model in the kind of the best way. What is the best model? And I think sometimes maybe to us, we might have over the years have elaborated convictions not only about the benefits of the needs for the life cycle perspective, but also on more particular ways on the especially correct way to model things. And I'm asking you to try and kind of challenge part of that in the light of this development, that when policy is driving, it might be difficult to get everything aboard that you love and that you feel is the most important. But on the other hand, since it will have a big effect on the environment, it might be a good time to kind of seize the day and go along with the policy flow and try to make it maybe not perfect, but sufficiently good to drive sustainable development. So finally, I have some words for the public policy officials. Now, they may not be that present here today, but I'm sure we will all help to carry out the message to them. The resource theme, of course, is my most important. As I said, the life cycle community is a scarce resource, and they need to understand this also. The government officials need to understand that this resource needs to be managed in the most careful way if they want to use it in order to improve policy. So be mindful of that resource. And the other thing, since during the time that public policy wasn't at all kind of driving LCA development, they still put aside funding for the research. And of course, this is something that needs to be maintained irrespective of this policy development. The policymakers have no idea what kind of policy they will implement in 10 or 15 years. And they need to continue fund the research the way that they have done as of now, or should we say maybe even more. And then maybe a third message to the policy officials, and that would be considering that the government agency part of this pie chart is still pretty low. Spread the words. There need to be more of us in these kind of conferences. We need more engagement from the policy officials in order to further integrate life cycle assessment into the policy development for the future. Thank you very much.